In this one, we're going to be converting the single outlet box that currently has a duplex outlet installed into a double outlet box that includes a USB charger. So stay tuned and I'll walk you through the process. Alright guys, let's have a look now at the parts we're going to be using for this job. I'm going to put a link in the description where you can purchase all these items. First thing we have here is a 4-port USB charger. I have a matching Decora outlet to go along with that in the new box. Speaking of the boxes, I have two here. I have a 25 cubic inch box and a 34 cubic inch box. I'm probably going to opt to use the bigger box just to give myself a little bit of extra room in there to make the connections. Okay, and then we have a new 2-gang outlet cover as well. So let's get started. First and foremost, we're going to shut this circuit off at our breaker panel so we can work on this safely. Alright guys, so I think it's worthwhile to mention that if you want to add a hardwired USB charger, you don't necessarily have to go the route that I'm going here with removing the existing box out of the wall to put a bigger box in. They do sell outlets that have an integrated USB charger built into them, and what that will allow you to do is just remove the existing outlet out of the junction box and replace it with this new device. You don't have to remove the old junction box out of the wall and install a bigger one. I did, however, want 4 charging ports, not 2, so my only option here was to remove the existing box from the wall, install a double gang box, which would allow me 2 separate devices to get 4 charging ports, as well as maintaining the original duplex outlet at this location. So here we're just removing the wiring from the existing outlet. Now take note, we have 2 separate pieces of Romex coming into this box. One is bringing power into the outlet, and the other one is taking power out and feeding the next device downstream. I'm going to show you later on in the video how we connect all these back together. Now, as with any electrical project, if any of this is sounding foreign to you or if you do not feel comfortable, it is probably best to hire a licensed electrician so they can complete this job for you. So before we get started removing the existing box out of the wall, what you want to do is just separate all these conductors and also the ground wires. You can see how the ground wires are all wrapped together right now. We're gonna separate those two because it looks like the 2 pieces of Romex are coming into this box through separate holes. And when we take this box out of the wall, obviously we've got to take the wires out as well, and that's going to prevent that from happening. The stud that this box is mounted to is on the right side. I could tell that by seeing some nails ghosting through on the right side of the box here where the drywall is secured. So I know when I remove this box, I got to pry from this side to get the 2 nails out of this to remove it. So we're going to start that process now. A little tip, obviously we're going to be doing a little bit of damage here. Whoever cut this box in, I think, made a mistake initially, because I see a piece of tape here on the drywall, which means they had to close a gap in over here more or less when the drywall was cut in correctly. I'm going to go ahead and score that and cut that off. And we're going to be prying the box out. We're going to need a little bit of extra room on this side to get the box out of the wall. Now, don't forget that we're going to be cutting our new double gang box in like this, covering the existing hole, and then we have to enlarge this hole as well. So we can cut a little bit of this out now, cut that away, so it gives us a little bit of extra wiggle room to get the box out of the wall. Tool I like to use for this is this nail puller. I'll put a link in my Amazon store down below as well, so you can pick one of these up. And what we're going to basically be looking to do is just insert this in the wall somewhere around here and just keep prying it. Eventually you'll get those nails out and the box should pop out. Let's get started. Alright guys, so just like that, you get this old box out of there. You can see I had to monkey around with it a little bit. You kind of have to wiggle it around, find the best way to get the wires out of the top or the bottom of it, depending on where they're coming into your existing box you're trying to remove. Alright, so again, we got our new box here. I'm going to check this hole now to see if I have to enlarge it any bit more to get this to fit in there. Before we go ahead and put the box in the wall and sock down these tabs, we got to insert the wires into the holes on the new box. So just keep that in mind. You don't want to obviously put the box in, these things back in there. There's no way you're going to be able to get them through the holes. So before we go any further here, what I like to do before we install the new box is I'll take some electrical tape and I'll wrap the end of the Romex, both pieces here. And what that'll help us with is when we go ahead and pull these into the box, the end of the wire here won't get hung up on the box when you're trying to pull it through. More or less just bundling everything together so the wire doesn't get stuck on the tabs of the box. You don't have a lot of room to work with here, so so all you're looking to do is something like that right here. See now how we have all the loose ends of that sheathing underneath the tape? You just wrap the tape around, and then as you're wrapping it, pull it tight with your finger so you get a nice tight wrap on the wire. Alright, so just like that. Zoom in so you can see that. That's what you're looking for. We're going to pull these wires into place. A little bit tricky to do sometimes. Just take your time. You don't want to skin any of these conductors as you're putting them into place. That'll cause you all sorts of issues and problems with getting this done with no damage to the wall. If you cut any of these things or you mess them up, you're going to have to pull the wires back. You're going to have to put a box in somewhere to splice in new wires, and that can turn into a mess real quick. So we want to avoid that at all costs. Again, just take your time. It's not a race. You want to pull both sets of these wires, so both pieces of Romex, into the box so you see that tape and some of the sheathing exposed. You don't want these individual conductors sticking out of the box into the wall. After you get them in place, you can go ahead and place it in the wall, and we could sock down these two screws here, and those will expand those tabs on the other side of the drywall and pull the box flush with the wall. You can see how these tabs on our old work box protrude away from the box, and those sit on the surface of the drywall and prevent the box from falling in the wall. So let me get those two screws clamped into place, and then I'm going to pull the rest of these wires into the box. You don't want to crank these down too much. It's only plastic. You'll break them off. What I like to do is sock them down until the point where I start seeing a little bit of resistance. Then I'll give it another half turn like that. And do the other one now. Half turn, and that box isn't going anywhere. If you sock those down too tight, you will blow this box right through the wall, and it's going to make the hole too big. You won't be able to put a new box in place, and then you're going to be doing drywall work. We don't want to do that again. Alright guys, so there you have it. Didn't happen without a fight though. I actually had to carve this opening up a little bit just to raise the box up ever so slightly. So I had enough of the insulation on the Romex sticking into the box to make this work. So another issue we have here is the ground wire on one of our pieces of Romex is way too short. As you can see here, I don't have enough to twist these together and put a wire nut on that. So what I'm going to use is one of these connectors here, and I've used this before in one of my other videos when I installed recessed lighting. Basically, essentially how this works is you just push the wires into it until they lock into place, and then this won't pull off of them. So I'm going to cut this one back as well. We'll insert both those in there, and then I have a scrap piece of Romex here that I stripped out a piece of ground wire, and that'll go into the other hole in this, and that'll be the connection to our devices, our outlet and the USB charger. Snip that piece of ground wire back, and Before I go ahead and lock this one in the back onto those other two, I'm going to put our pigtail onto that. It's going to be difficult to work in the back of that box. Really hate cutting that wire that short, but it's got to be done here to make this work. I'm actually going to cut it back just a hair more, and that should be good for what we need to do. I know you guys aren't probably seeing much right now, but I'll give you a close-up when we get this in and locked into place. These push connectors, or stab lock connectors as they're often called, are real lifesavers when you run into situations like this. I'm giving it a tug now, and all those are on there nice and secure, and we fixed that problem. And you can see we got a nice long pigtail now to work with. These luckily are long enough. We're not going to have an issue with those. So here's a close-up of our USB charger, and like I said before, very similar in size to a dimmer switch, and the connections are also similar to a dimmer switch as well. You can see they pre-wire these pigtails on here. So how we're going to do the connection on this, again, like I said, we're going to be installing an outlet in this box as well. I'm going to take our hots, so our black wires, and we have our neutrals, which are our whites. And I'm just going to connect the charger, the white wire from the charger to the neutrals, and the black to the hots, obviously. And then what I'm going to add to both those connections as well is another pigtail to jump over to the outlet. And of course we're going to put wire nuts in all those connections. The ground, we're going to twist the ground wire on here. Again, I'm going to show you all these connections. And then we're going to use this wire nut here that allows the ground wire to pass up through the top of it through this hole. Now you're going to see a bunch of different techniques for splicing wires. My technique is just to make everything neat from the get-go, and I like making all my wires the same length. Some guys will coil them up in the back of the box. It's kind of a sloppy way of doing it. I don't recommend you do that. So I'll just come in and I'll snip them back a little bit, just like that, so they're both the same length. Again, just going to cut it back, and we will strip the wire back. You can see when we do that, it's going to make the connection a little bit easier to do. The charger has braided wire on it. That's okay. Not really an issue. I'm just going to strip a little bit more off of this so we can get an extra couple wraps on the conductors. About that long. And again, like I said, I have a scrap piece of Romex here that I pulled the conductors out of the sheathing, and I'll strip a little bit off of that as well. Both the neutral and the hot. Now we can start making our connections. So a pair of linesmen. Go ahead and take your wires, make them so they're about the same length on the end where you strip the insulation off, and twist them together clockwise. You want to do this a couple times to get a nice tight wrap on the wires. Make sure you do it clockwise. Counterclockwise isn't going to work, because when you go ahead and put your wire nut on, it's going to unwrap all the wires. And you, like I said, you want a nice tight connection with this. Alright, so that's basically what you're looking for. Going to do the same thing with our neutral wire. Again, put them together and wrap them clockwise. So we got our USB charger now. We'll work on our hot side. We're going to wrap this on here as well, around the solid wire that we previously connected together. Now I'm going to take my wire cutters. I'm going to snip the end of those wires back to make a nice clean end. Take our wire nut, screw that into place nice and tight. Give all the wires a tug, make sure they're not going to come apart. And that's how you do a nice secure connection with your conductors. Same process with our neutral conductors. We'll go ahead and add our braided charging wire on there, just like that. I'm going to snip back the wires. and add our wire nut. Sock it down real tight. And again, give your wires a tug. Make sure none of them are going to come out, and we're good. We have our grounds. Same procedure here, except we're going to do it around the same length that we made our neutral and our hot conductors. Right about there. Then take our special green wire nut, run that down this, and make our connection. Just like that. And you can see we are nice and tight, and that isn't going anywhere. You see how nice that makes this connection for us now to hook up our outlet. All right, and finally we have our new duplex outlet. We're going to do the connections for that. These right now, these pigtails are way too long. I'm going to cut those back. Really only need about that much wire on this. I'm going to take our wire strippers, strip some of the insulation back, and with our needle nose, we'll put a nice J-hook on the end of both these wires. Take your black hot wire, and that's going to get connected to your gold screw or your brass screw. And notice how I loop the wire in on the bottom of the screw. You always want to put the wire on in a way so when you're tightening the screw, it's pulling the wire into the screw and wrapping it around tighter as you're tightening the screw. Same thing on this side, it's just that you're flipping the outlet around, so it's the opposite now. We're going to loop the white neutral wire around the silver screw. And that's going to go around the top of the screw, like that. Hold it in place. Again, so that when we're tightening the screw, it's pulling the wire into the connection and tightening it up. Last connection we're going to make is our ground. What I'm going to do before we do that is just tighten these spare two screws on this. They're not going to be used for our installation today. Just like that. And we'll take our ground wire. Again, we're a little bit too long. I'm going to snip a little bit of this off. And we will loop that around our last screw on the bottom here, our ground screw, which is green. We'll tighten that up. And our connections are complete here. Next step, we're going to fold all these wires up as neatly as possible so we can tuck everything in the back of the box nice and clean where nothing is pinched. Again, just a couple folds with the wire, get everything in there nice and neat, and you can see how having that deeper box just gives you a ton of room to work with. Much easier, and I highly recommend you go that route rather than using the smaller box if you can. And we're going to sock down these screws now into the box to tighten everything up. We want the outlet and the charger to be nice and square in the box, so when you go ahead and put the plate on, everything looks nice and straight and perpendicular on the wall. And we'll install our charger into the box next. Now you can see over here in the process of installing this, remember in the beginning when I told you that it looked like they cut the hole too big initially for the existing box and they taped it? That was definitely the case, and you could see the coat of mud that was over that piece of tape flaked off. So, a couple little hiccups with this job here, but I always prefer a YouTube video that includes a few of these things in it, mistakes or problems that arise along the way, because it's a real life example of the different things you might encounter when doing something like this. What's the point of having a video that is perfect from start to finish that omits all these problems? Because like I said, they do happen. So like I said, for everything that you do, there's always a fix. Let's see what we have here with this plate, if this is going to cover this or not. And you can see it's not. You see I have a problem over here. I got a little overzealous when I was on video cutting out that opening to rip out the old box, and I went a little bit too far. So, like I stated before, this is a standard box cover. If you were to use this, you're going to have to come back with some drywall mud and just mud around the box, sand it, touch it up, and paint it. But there is an option if you screw up like I did here, and I'll show you that now. So here's the answer to our problem when the hole is cut too large around the box. This is called a midway cover, and you can see it's 3/8 of an inch larger than a standard cover that we previously just tried. So go ahead and see our luck with this one now and see if it covers our damage. And you can see over here we have a little bit of piece of the drywall that is flaked off still, but that's something I could touch up with a paintbrush. Another trick you could try is you can loosen up the 2 screws that hold the junction box in the wall, and then you can move that around if you have to see if you can cover up these problems. I'm actually going to try that right now real quick. I don't think we're going to be able to do it though. There's not really a lot of room. It moved a little bit maybe. Let's see what we have. Yeah, that at this point almost disappeared, so we're looking good with that. But again, something to look out for. Double check your measurements when you're putting your screws into place and tightening them up. Make it so the slots on the screw heads are all in the same direction. Gives your job that finishing touch. Alright, so I went ahead and turned power back on to this circuit, and I'm happy to report that we have power to our outlet. And let's give our USB charger a try. And as you can see, we got power to my phone. Successful project. Hope you guys picked up a thing or two. Again, a couple little mishaps along the way. Went ahead and touched up the paint on the one side of the outlet there, and you can't even tell we had a problem now. So that about wraps it up, guys. Again, check the description for links to my Amazon store for all the products that I used in this video. And as always, thanks for watching and have a great day.